You know, my dad, Coach Vance, a legend in the NFL. He had a saying for me and my brother. He always said, Caleb has the $1 million army. And you, Mia, you have the brain. It was his way of complimenting us both. Translation: My brother was the talent, the football star. And me? I was the tool. And my brain work. Hard. I was the one who put together the training program that brought him back from scratch after his college injury. I was the one who told him what to eat, when to sleep, how to optimize every muscle fiber. Every detail, every piece of data, went through me. I prepared him for every Sunday, for every battle. It was my work that got him to the Super Bowl. Cut to the end of the game. 7 seconds on the clock. We are down by 4 points. The entire stadium in Dallas is making a noise so loud you can't even think. But don't need to think. I see. On my tablet, I see their defensive formation. And there's a flaw. One of the safeties hesitates for a millisecond, just a little out of position. But my software catches it. It's enough. I press the button on my headset that connects directly to his helmet. Caleb, listen to me, my voice is call, code. Change the play. Viper set danger now. The safety is out of position. Your target is the inside receiver, on the far side. Go. He did it. Perfectly. The pass, the touchdown. The confetti falling. We won the damn Super Bowl. Cut again. The podium. My brother, the hero, Cream, holding the trophy. And he tells the world, I want to thank my dad for the strength and my instinct, which guided me here. My instinct. Recalled my data analysis, my science, my strategy. Instinct. It's a joke, right? By the way, where in the world are you all watching this circus from? And that's when it hit me. In that moment, watching everyone celebrate his instinct, I understood. To the world, he was the champion. But the truth? I was the architect behind him. I was just the program running on the computer. The secret software that made everything work, but was name no one would ever know. That night was his greatest victory, and the moment he realized it didn't exist. If you want to see what happens when the software decides to revolt, subscribe to the channel. Because the story of how we hacked their system is just beginning. So, what was the dynamic like behind the scenes? It had a fancy name, the Vance Performance Center, a state-of-the-art training facility in Texas that designed myself. But in practice, it was my golden cage. A high-tech lab where spend my days turning my brother into superior, and spend his nights reaping the rewards, with no idea how the magic really happened. My day-to-day life was anything but glamorous. It started at 5 in the morning. While Caleb was still asleep, he was already analyzing his sleep-ring data, adjusting his nutrition plan based on his nightly recovery. When he arrived to train, everything was ready. Every exercise, every repetition, every second of rest was calculated. He spent hours watching in slow motion, on a high-definition monitor, the way his foot rotated when he trailed the ball, adjusting the Clayton his show by millimeters to gain more torque. He measured the rotational velocity of his arm, the biomechanics of his hip. He was the chief scientist, the engineer, and the mechanic of a $1 million human machine. He, on the other hand, just followed the instructions. He lifted the weights told him to, run the sprint timed, and drank the protein shakes prepared. Then, he would leave. He then go to a photo shoot, a podcast interview, a dinner with some pons. And watched his life on Instagram while he cleaned the motion sensors we had taped to his body. The dynamic of injustice was this. He generated the data, he became the story. My father, Coach Vance, was the manager of this production line. He would come into my lab, not to look at my charts or understand the science, but to look through the glass at his son, his great project, lifting weights. He then pat me on the back and say with pride, look at that, Mia. Natural talent. You can't manufacture that. And then he turned to me and said, good job with the maintenance. Keep making sure the Ferrari doesn't break down. A Ferrari. A valuable tool, but a replaceable one. That's what was to him. The pattern of invalidation was constant. And their favorite weapon was the warrior mentality. Once, the data from my monitoring system showed something alarming. Caleb's cortisol levels were dangerously high, and his muscle recovery markers were in a free fall. He was overtraining. I prepared a report and presented it to my father. He needs 2 full days of rest, he said. If he continues at this pace, the risk of a serious muscle injury increases by 60%. My father didn't even look at the graphs. He laughed. 60%? Mia, your science makes you soft. This is the NFL, not a biology class. Champions are made in pain. It is the repetition, the fatigue that makes them stronger. You're trying to turn my son into a lab rat. I made him a warrior. Warriors don't take days off. My concerns, based on years of study and concrete data, were dismissed as academic if that were an insult. The final betrayal, the one that erased my existence from the story, came a few months after the Super Bowl. Caleb was named the league's MVP, the most valuable player. And with that came the dream contract, $50 million with Nike. He should have been happy. But then he saw the campaign. He was at an airport bar, waiting for a flight to a biomechanics conference, when the commercial came on TV. The screen filled with a slow-motion shot of Caleb, his breath visible in the cold air, his eyes focused. The music was epic, inspiring. And then, the narrator's voice said, "Some call it talent. Others, hard work. He calls it instinct." And on the screen, in giant letters, the slogan appeared, Caleb Vance, pure instinct. I almost shocked. Instinct. They took furious of my life, my PhD, the sleepless nights, the analysis of every calorie and every brainwave during sleep, and turned it into a two-word slogan. My meticulous work to prevent injuries was sold as if it were the magical strength of a warrior. My data analysis that gave him the winning play in the Super Bowl was sold as a lucky guess. At 34, my science was packaged and sold to the world as if it were magic. And me? It was even the magic. It was the trick no one saw. That Nike campaign changed something in me. It wasn't about the credit anymore. It was about reality. They were selling the story of a man who didn't need science, a superwoman who won by the sheer force of his will. And saw the data every day. He knew, with the certainty of a mathematical theorem, that his body was beginning to pay the price for this dangerous fantasy. He had the numbers that proved the magic was about to run out. And disastrously so. The disaster didn't start with a bang. It started with a pop. A small pop in Caleb's shoulder during a light practice on a Tuesday, a sound only he felt, but that saw. He saw it in the way he discreetly rotated his arm, trying to hide it. He saw it in the small Vince of pen retrieved to conceal from the team cameras. And my sensors, which he still wore under his uniform, confirmed it. The rotational velocity of his arm dropped by 8% on the next throw. The trajectory of his elbow changed by 3 degrees to compensate. The data doesn't lie. The magic of pure instinct was beginning to fail. That night, I confronted him. In my lab, I showed him the data on a 60-inch screen. I showed him the thermal image of his shoulder, with a red patch of inflammation that was there the week before. I showed him the torque and muscle recovery graphs, all on an alarming downward trend. Caleb, you need to stop, said, my voice calm and scientific. The predictive model shows an 85% probability of a significant rotator cuff tear in the next 6 weeks if you continue at this pace. We need a rest and rehabilitation program. Now. He looked at the graphs, then at me. The seed of doubt my father had planted about my science that made him viac had taken root. It is just pain, Mia, he said, reciting our father's mantra. Every player in the NFL plays with pain. It is part of the job. This is just pain, he insisted. This is a warning. It is your body screaming that it is about to break. That's when my father walked into the room. He saw the screen, saw the look of doubt on Caleb's face, and immediately went on the attack, not against the injury, but against me. The tension in the room became almost physical. It was science versus MYTH, data versus dogma. Champions play through pain, Mia, he said, his coach voice showing in the room. That's what separates them from the others. It is mental toughness. Tom Brady played a whole playoff with stitches in his hand. Michael Jordan won a finals game with a 103 fever. Do you want Caleb's legacy to be the quarterback who kid because of a computer graph? Return to Caleb. Don't let her put these ideas in your head, son. Your greatest weapon is your confidence. She's trying to turn you into a lab rat. He made you a warrior. From that day on, he was put in a medical quarantine. They scheduled a meeting with the team doctors, and went, armed with my dossier of data. The head doctor, an old friend of my father's, flipped through my 20-page report with condescending boredom. He didn't ask a single question about my methodology. Returned to my father and said, well, coach, recém-stog. Will give him a cortisone shot, reinforce the shoulder padding, and see how he does on Sunday. My predictive analysis, my PhD, my work, all of it was dismissed in favor of injection and a cliché about toughness. The subsequent meetings about Caleb's condition happened without me. He was informed of decisions after they were made. He was the sister with a PhD, an eccentric figure with her computers, but not a serious part of the conversation. They preferred the judgment of an old-school coach and a team doctor who had more loyalty to the coach than to the Hippocratic oath. He made one last attempt. On Friday night, before the next game, he intercepted my father in the hallway. He showed him the latest data on my tablet. Caleb's inflammatory markers were through the roof. His shoulder stability had decreased to a critical level. Dad, please, he begged. He can't play. He's going to get seriously injured. He looked at my tablet, then at me, and his face hardened into a mask of pure irritation. For God's sake, Mia, stop being hysterical, he said, the word landing like a slap. It is just a little pain. He play through it. Hysterical. At 34, he had a dossier of data that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my brother's $1 million army, our family's most valuable asset, was about to tear. But he was called hysterical by my own father. The final revelation, for me, was understanding that they weren't just being stubborn. They were in deliberate denial. They preferred the risk of catastrophe to admitting that their warrior mentality philosophy was wrong and that my science was right. Their image as forgers of champions was more important than the career of the very champion they supposedly loved. And so, on Sunday, I was forced to watch, from my data booth, the countdown to the disaster I had predicted. I could not even look at the game, only at my monitors, which showed Caleb's biometric data in real time. With every throw he made, I saw the stress peaks in his shoulder. I held my breath. I saw the small compensation in his movement, the millisecond of pain on his face that only I, with the help of my technology, could recognize. I was the only person in the stadium who knew the truth. And could do nothing but wait. Wait for the sound of the cheer. I didn't have to wait long. The sound didn't come during a game, under the sunlights, with adrenaline to mask the pain. It came in a first practice, during a routine drill. It was the loud crack that everyone heard. It was a dull, sick pop that heard through the sensitive microphone Caleb wore under his pad so I could monitor his briefing. And then, the scream. A scream of pure, animal pain that silenced the entire practice field. The magic of instinct was over. The body had collected its due. The chaos that followed was predictable. Coaches, doctors, my father, everyone ran onto the field. I saw my father start to shout, the personification of the coach trying to motivate a player to get up. But he didn't wait. The scientist in me, the crisis planner, took over. I left my booth, went down to the field, and with an authority no one had ever seen me, I commanded the situation. Nobody move him. I shouted, my voice cutting through the panic. Get the stretcher. Immobilize the shoulder. I want ambulance here in 5 minutes. And cancel the rest of practice. My father turned to me, furious. What do you think you're doing? Doing my job, he replied, without blinking. Making sure your negligence doesn't cause permanent damage. In the confusion, no one argued. For the first time, they listened to me. At the hospital, while Caleb was in the MRE, the real work began. My father and the team doctors were on the phone, discussing surgeons and recovery timelines. E used der panic as my cover. E went to Caleb's business manager, a man whose only answered to my father, and said, I need access to all of Caleb's medical and financial records, now. To file the insurance. To consult specialist. I need everything. Amidst the crisis, he gave me the passwords. He gave me the keys to the kingdom. In aqui é, Ceterilli Hospital waiting room, e opened my laptop. My investigation began. I was looking for a injury. I was looking for a motive. Why had my father risked so much? Why had he ignored such clear evidence? I started with the financial statements. And that's where I found it. A series of large transfers, paid directly from Caleb's personal account, to a company had never heard of, Apex Bill Recovery. The total came to almost $2 million. My first thought was that it was an equipment supplier, perhaps. But the name, Bill Recovery, it sent a shiver down my spine. I kept digging. I found the company's registration. It was a small biotech startup, with an address in a tax haven. Its main innovation was an experimental, unapproved stem cell treatment for tissue regeneration. A treatment considered high risk with unproven results by the scientific community. My father, a man who had always despised my lab science, was investing my brother's money in a pseudoscience gamble. And then, the final horror. In a shared mail folder between the business manager and my father, I found the documentation that took my breath away. It was just an investment. It was a plan. There was a prepaid invoice and a schedule for Caleb to begin the experimental treatment the following week. My father was just investing in the company. He was preparing to use his own son as the main case study, as a human guinea pig to validate his financial bet and, no doubt, to create a miraculous recovery story for the press. I needed the final validation, the proof of intent. With my heart my throat, I used an old password of my father's, the name of his first high school football team, to access his personal cloud storage. And there it was. An email exchange between him and the CEO of Apex Bill Recovery. The sales email read, the partnership with an athlete of Caleb's caliber will be the catalyst we need for FDA approval. The narrative is perfect. My father's replay sealed his crime in my mind forever. I agree. The recovery of a Super Bowl MVP will be the best publicity we could dream of. RLL undergo the procedure next week. Prepare your marketing team. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical impact. My father was just ignoring my science. He was actively planning to replace it with a dangerous, unethical, and incredibly profitable gamble for himself. He was trying to save Caleb's career. He was preparing to profit from its ruin, using my brother's broken body as a venture capital asset in his investment portfolio. The playthrough pain was just a coaching philosophy. It was a business strategy to create the need for his product. In that moment, in the sterile silence of a hospital corridor, the concerned scientist died. And the protector was born. I closed the laptop. Caleb's MRE confirmed what my data had predicted. A near-complete rotator cuff tear. His career was hanging by a thread. My father entered the waiting room, his face a mask of rehearsed concern, already talking about cutting-edge options about a miracle clinic retrusted. He didn't know that he already knew everything. And as he spoke, I was taking out my phone and making a single call. Not to a doctor, but to the best litigation lawyer in Florida. The war for my brother's career was over. The war for his soul was just beginning. The war for my brother's soul was not fought with shots on a football field, but with documents in a que é, Ceterilli Hospital room. While my father, the coach, planned the experimental surgery and a marketing campaign, my new lawyer from Florida and planned a legal and medical takeover. The first step was the hardest, the most painful. I needed Caleb, broken physically and emotionally, to give me the power to act on his behalf. I needed him to believe me, and not the man he had idolized his entire life. I waited for the right moment. I waited until my father left the hospital to make some important calls, probably to his biotech startup. I entered Caleb's room. He was lying in bed, his shoulder immobilized, his face pale and swollen from pain and medication. The monitors beeped softly. Mia? He said, his voice weak. What is going on? Dad is talking about some new treatment, at a private clinic. I took a deep breath. The scientist me took over. Caleb, I need to show you something, said. My voice call but firm. And need you to listen to me, not as your little sister, but as the head of your performance team. The only person in this world whose sole job is to protect your body and your career. I sat beside his bed and opened my laptop. I didn't start with accusations. I started with facts. First, I showed him the bank statements, the transfers of millions of dollars from his account to Apex Bill Recovery. I showed him the company's website, the vague promises, the lack of published data, the absence of FDA approval. He looked confused. Dad said it was a good investment. It was a good investment for him, Caleb. He's a major shareholder, said, and showed him the company registration my Lavier had obtained. I saw the first crack in his expression. Then, I showed him the schedule. The experimental stencil procedure, prepared, in his name, for the following week. And finally, with a heavy heart, I showed him the emails. The exchange between our father and the startup CEO. The discussion about the marketing potential of using a Super Bowl MVP as a guinea pig. The mention of the miraculous return and FDA approval. I saw Caleb's face go from confusion to denial, and then to a horrific, devastating understanding. I saw the moment his image of his father as a hero shattered into 1,000 pieces. The tears that streamed down his face were not of physical pain, but of a betrayal so deep it seemed impossible. He was going to use me, he whispered, his voice broken. He was going to risk everything for a good deal, he replied softly. In that moment, he looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see the hysterical and academic little sister. He saw the only person who told him the truth. My Lavier entered the room with the papers. A full medical and financial power of attorney. Caleb signed it without hesitation. The control was mine. With legal power in my hands, the protector scientist sprang into action. While Caleb rested and began to process the trauma, I dove into a new investigation. I spent 48 hours in a research marathon, consulting via video with the best orthopedic surgeons and sport scientists in the world, from Germany to Australia. I read every paper, every case study on rotator cuff recovery in elite athletes. And based on that, I designed the most holistic and personalized rehabilitation plan that science allowed. It was a miracle cure. It was a meticulous plan. The first step was surgery, but not with the team doctor. I scheduled a consultation with Dr. James Andrews in Birmingham, Alabama, the best orthopedic surgeon for athletes on the planet. The second step was an 8-month physical rehabilitation protocol, monitored daily by my technology, adjusting the load and stress in real time to maximize healing. The third was a strict anti-inflammatory nutrition plan. The fourth was psychological support to deal with the trauma of the injury and the betrayal. With the plan ready, I executed the takeover. My Lavier flew to meet my father, handing him the documents that officially removed him as Caleb's agent and manager, voiding all contracts. The reaction, I was told, was volcanic. But legally, he could do nothing. Next, I went personally to the Ten's training facility and, with Caleb's power of attorney in hand, informed the team doctor, in front of the general manager, that his services would no longer be required for Caleb's rehabilitation, citing professional negligence and conflict of interest. The final step was to get Caleb out of there. In a key operation, in the middle of the night, we transferred him to a private jet and flew to Birmingham. Away from the eyes of the press, away from my father's toxic influence. With Caleb safe in Alabama and my father legally delineated, the battlefield was finally clear. The destruction phase was over. Now, the hardest and longest part began. The reconstruction. I had a plan, the best doctors in the world, and science on my side. But the question that hung in the air, the variable that no data of mine could predict, was, after such a deep betrayal and such a severe injury, could Caleb's body be fixed? And more importantly, would his will to be a champion still exist? Sometimes, to protect someone we love, we have to make difficult decisions and take control. Tell me in the comments, what was a situation where you had to intervene and take the reins to protect someone from a bad decision or a negative influence? The answer to the first question, if Caleb's body could be fixed, came from science, patience, and brutal hard work, day after day, in the care of a rehabilitation clinic in Alabama. The answer to the second if his will to be a champion still existed was much more complicated to find. The rehabilitation in Birmingham was just the reconstruction of a shoulder. It was the deconstruction and reconstruction of a man. The first few months were hell. The surgery, performed by the legendary Dr. Andrews, was a technical success, but the road back was a steep and painful mountain. Caleb, the superstar, the MVP, was reduced to a state of near infancy, unable to lift his arm to get a glass of water. His identity, built on physical strength and public adulation, had disintegrated. He was moody, depressed, and in the early days, hated me. He saw me as the personification of his weakness, the scientist who had warned him, the sister who now controlled every aspect of his life. But was his sister there? I was his director of performance. And my plan was relentless. Every day, I was there, not with words of comfort, but with my laptop and my sensors. I measured the angle of his range of motion in tenths of a degree. I analyzed his blood samples to adjust his anti-inflammatory diet. I put him on biofeedback machines that taught him to reactivate the tiny muscles around his scapula. It was slow, frustrating, and completely unglamorous work. It was science in its purest form. And for the first time, Caleb was forced to participate in the process. I didn't just tell him what to do, I showed him the data. I showed him the graphs of his incremental improvement. Look, Caleb. Today you had 2% more external rotation than yesterday. Your posterior deltoid activation increased by 4%. Slowly, something began to change. He started asking questions. He started to take interest in the data. He went from frustration to curiosity. The warrior mentality my father had instilled in him, the idea of just playing through pain was being replaced by a deep understanding of the incredible machine that was his own body. He was learning the language of science. Meanwhile, the legal and public relations war continued. The sports world was in a frenzy over Caleb's disappearance. My father, through his channels in the press, leaked stories that Caleb was in a mysterious clinic implying that he had kidnapped him and was ruining his career with experimental methods. That's when ESPN, sniffing out a complex story, got a lead on our location. I expected a hostile reporting team. Instead, I found a young, smart producer who was more interested in my technology than in the family drama. I made a strategic decision. I gave them access. I let them film the rehabilitation, see the sensors, the data, the science behind it all. The story they began to tell was about the fall of a star. It was about the rise of a new method. The ESPN report, which I read as a 1-hour special, was my final weapon against my father. The program showed, in devastating fashion, the contrast between my scientific, meticulous, data-driven approach and the old guard brute force philosophy. They interviewed me, and spoke not as a sister, but as a PhD in sport science, explaining the logic behind every step of Caleb's recovery. The revelation for the public was shocking. Caleb's success was the magic or instinct. It was cutting-edge science. And the person who controlled it was me. With the imminent threat of the full story, the biotech fraud, the emails, the betrayal coming to light, a threat my Lavier made very clear to his Lavier, my father was cornered. In a key settlement, to avoid a public scandal that would destroy his legacy forever, he relinquished all his duties as Caleb's agent and manager, transferring all financial and career control to the new entity he had created to manage my brother's affairs. The takeover was complete. Caleb's return to the field, again months after the injury, was my victory day. He was just yelled. He was better. Stronger, smarter, with more efficient throwing mechanics than ever before, because now his entire body worked in harmony. He was no longer just a $1 million arm. He was a $100 million athlete, fully optimized. The ESPN story made him a legend, but in a new way. And it turned me from a footnote in his story to the headline of my own. From the nerd sister to the mind who reinvented elite athlete rehabilitation. My story, the truth of my work, was finally being told. Caleb's return was a triumph of science. My method was validated on the world's biggest stage. But with my father out of the picture and the press call me a genius e realize the code no longer behind my data and my labs. The secret software had been dragged into the sunlight. The question was, what would do with this spotlight? My first reaction to the spotlight was to retreat. I was not a star, I was a scientist. My natural habitat was the cool light of a computer monitor, not the warm glare of television cameras. But then realized that the spotlight, which was once the stage for my brother's performance, could be a new and powerful tool for me. A microscope. A way to illuminate not a person, but an idea. The idea that an athlete's health is not an obstacle to victory, but the only sustainable path to it. The shift began at Caleb's first press conference after his triumphant return. The reporters were in a frenzy, all wanting to know about the miraculous recovery. A journalist asked, Caleb, how did you do it? What was the secret? I, as usual, was backstage, ready to monitor the conference from a control room. But Caleb, in a mobile yet terraced, turned and looked for me in the crowd. Actually, he said into the microphone, the person you should be asking is my sister, Dr. Vance. She's the architect of all this. A shocked silence fell over the room as all eyes turned to me. My heart raced. But when I stepped up to that podium, I didn't see an audience to be charmed. I saw a classroom. And began to teach. Instead of using jargon about instinct and grit I explained. I talked about how we used data analysis to create a rehabilitation protocol that strengthened his shoulder support muscles before we even started working on his throw. I talked about how anti-inflammatory nutrition accelerated the healing at a cellular level. I used simple analogies to explain complex biomechanics concepts. The tension in my mind, the stage fright, was replaced by the confidence of my knowledge. The revelation was that my authority didn't come from charisma, but from expertise. And people are hungry for it. That press conference changed the narrative. The story was no longer about Caleb's magical return. It was about his sister's revolutionary method. And that led me to the cover of Sports Illustrated. The journalist who wrote the profile spent a week with me. He didn't want to see me at gala events. He wanted to see me in my laboratory. He watched me analyze Caleb's sleep data, design his workouts, discuss the results of his blind tests. He saw the science in action. When the article was published, the title took me by surprise. It was about the genius behind the star. The headline was, Dr. Amelia Vance, the guardian of the game. The article portrayed me not as a tool for an athlete's success, but as a force fighting for the health and longevity of all athletes, using science as a weapon against the playthrough until you break culture. The nickname stuck. The Guardian. I was no longer the secret software. I was the protector of the system. And this new identity fit me like a glove. My deepest personal transformation, however, came in a moment of silence, in a video room, just me and Caleb, preparing for the first game of the new season. We were analyzing our next opponent's defense. He, with his years of on-field experience. Me, with my predictive models. Look here, Mia, he said, pausing the video. Their safety always takes a false step to the right before a blitz. I feel it on the field. I turned to my laptop and pulled up my data. You're right, he said, showing him the screen. My algorithm confirms it. In 78% of third and long situations, he does exactly that. Your feeling is a recognizable data pattern. In that moment, I understood. My father was completely wrong. Science didn't weaken Caleb's instinct. It enhanced it, validated it, gave him the confidence to believe what he saw. And discovered the truth about my own philosophy. True strength is not in ignoring pain or risk, but in understanding them, respecting them, and using knowledge to navigate through them. My caution, which my father called aviacness, was actually wisdom. It was the true champion's instinct, the instinct for survival, for intelligence, and for longevity. I had found my voice, my identity, and my purpose. I was no longer the secret software hidden backstage. I was the architect of a new system, a new way of thinking about sports. But I knew that for the revolution to be complete, for the new order to be truly established, I needed one last confrontation. I needed to face the architect of the old system, The man who taught me everything about the warrior mentality and who almost used it to destroy my brother. My father. I knew he would come. For a man like my father, a victory like Caleb's was a celebration. It was an opportunity to claim credit. The confrontation didn't happen in an office or a boardroom. It happened in the most sacred and profane place in the NFL, the locker room, minutes after Caleb's first comeback game. The victory had been spectacular. Caleb played with a calm and precision that shocked the world, leading a fourth-quarter comeback. And knew my father would be there, waiting in the wings, like a king waiting to receive tribute from his victorious vassal. The locker room was a chaos of happiness. Players were screaming, music was blasting, the press was jostling outside. But in the corner where Caleb was sitting, there was an island of calm and science. I was celebrating. I was working. With my tablet in hand, I was already analyzing his biometric data from the game, showing him the graphs of his exertion. Your shoulder held up well, I said, my voice professional amidst the noise. But your hydration levels are low. Drink this now. I handed him a bottle with an electrolyte mixture I had prepared. He took it, without question. This was our new dynamic. Mutual respect, based on data. It was then that the locker room door opened and my father strode in. He looked like a shark cutting through water, the younger players moving out of his way out of pure reflex of respect and fear. He ignored everyone. He ignored me. His eyes were fixed on Caleb. He stopped in front of his son, who was still sitting, exhausted. You see, kid, he said, his voice booming with a possessive pride. You see what Tognis does? They said you are finished. They said hard science made you soft. But made you. It gave you the mentality. The strength to push through the damn pain. That's what won the game today, not hard computers. He was trying to rekindle the old fire, trying to reconnect with the warrior he believed he had created. But something was different. Caleb didn't immediately respond with a yes, coach. He just took a deep, very breath. And then, he looked at me. A quick, almost imperceptible glance, but it said everything. He was seeking my approval, not my father's. The surprise on my father's face, as he realized he was no longer the sole source of authority in the room, was total. That small look was the spark that lit the powder keg. That's when Soto happened stepped between them. Not aggressively. Just a simple step forward, occupying the space. You're wrong, Dad said, my voice calm, but cutting through the noise. He finally turned to me, his eyes blazing. What are you talking about? Did you see what he did out there? I did, I agreed. I saw an elite athlete executing a game plan based on a week of data analysis. And saw a perfectly rehabilitated body functioning at its peak efficiency because we respected its physiological limits. I looked at him. The mentality you gave him, coach, was the one that got him on the operating table. The mentality that taught him to ignore his own body signals to the point of rupture. That is the strength. It is a recipe for disaster. And we almost lost everything because of it. I made him a champion. He yelled, his voice shone. No, he replied, my tone unchanged. You quashed him. And then, with your philosophy, you broke him. I, with my science, rebuild him. And rebuild him better. The quarterback who played today is no longer your blind warrior. He is my intelligent athlete. He is stronger because the support muscles we strengthened for a game months now protect his shoulder. He is more accurate because his biomechanics are more efficient. He is more durable because he understands the difference between pain and damage. I paused, looking at the man who was once the most imposing figure in my life and who now just seemed loud. The revelation here is simple. You are obsessed with building a legend, a MYTH about a warrior who overcame pain. I was focused on protecting a person, a human being, my brother. And today, the person won. The legend you wanted would have a short career and a lifetime of chronic pain. The person I protected has the chance for a long career and a out life after it. I glanced at Caleb, who was watching everything in silence. And then I turned back to my father. Now, if you will excuse us, my clean has a 12-minute ice bath and a cryotherapy session to get to, based on the post-game recovery protocol. and you are not part of the protocol. My father sat there, in the middle of the noise locker room, speechless, for the first time in his life. The great coach Vance had no more place, no more answers. He looked at me, then at Caleb, and saw in our faces an alliance he could not break. Return and walk out of the locker room, and with him went the last ghost of my old life. I looked at Caleb, who looked exhausted, but, for the first time, at peace. His body was healed. His career was saved. But knew, looking in his eyes, that the hardest battle, the war against the mental demons my father had installed in him for 20 years, was just beginning. The war against the mental demons my father had installed in Caleb was more subtle and more dangerous than any NFL defense. On the field, under the lights, he was a hero again, his body a perfectly calibrated machine. But of it, in the silence of the locker room or the stillness of his apartment, he saw the cracks. The hesitation before making a decision, an almost imperceptible fear of re-injury with every sudden move, and a deep, consuming anger and confusion about our father. His body was optimized, but his mind was in a civil war. And that was a battle for which my biomechanics data had no answer. I needed a new kind of expert, a new kind of science. My investigation, this time, was not in papers on surgery, but in journals of sport psychology. I was looking for a motivator or a guru. I was looking for a scientist of the mind. My search criteria were rigorous. I found the name Dr. Ethan Cole, a renowned sports psychologist, but one who was seen as a dissident by many in the old guard. He didn't use inspirational speeches. He used neurofeedback, cognitive behavioral therapy, and evidence-based mindfulness techniques. He was a scientist. Convincing Caleb to accept the help was my first major tension as his new agent. I don't need a shrine, Mia, he said. The defense in his voice a direct echo of our father's philosophy. I'm not Viac. This has nothing to do with Viacness, Caleb replied, opening my laptop. It was the only language he now trusted. This is about data. Your reaction time in the pocket has slowed by an average of 0.3 seconds when you're under pressure. That's not physical. Your heart rate recovery after a stressful play is severe. That's not muscular. Your hardware is perfect. It is your software that's lagging. And I'm not the expert to fix it. But found the guy who is. Our first meeting with Dr. Ethan Cole was a revelation. He didn't start by asking Caleb how he felt about his father. He started by asking about his process. Caleb, describe to me what goes through your head in the 3 seconds before the snap, he said, his voice calm and analytical. He listened to Caleb, and then turned to me. Mia, could you show me his heart rate and muscle activation data during those 3 seconds? I showed him. And for the first time, I saw someone look at my data and see a layer that could not see. Interesting, Ethan said, pointing at the screen. The stress peak is at the moment of the snap, but a second before. It is anticipation. It is the fear of the mistake, not the mistake itself. He then looked at me, and a smile of mutual admiration arose between us. Mia, you optimize the hardware in a way I've never seen. It is genius. I optimize the software. Together, we can build an unstoppable athlete. He respected my data. I respected his. Our partnership began there, a fusion of the science of the body and the science of the mind. Ethan began working with Caleb, using visualization and mindfulness techniques to help him control his pregame anxiety. And saw the results in my data. His cortisol levels dropped, his heart rate variability improved. Ethan helped him process the anger and pain of our father's betrayal, and saw the results on the field. His decisions became faster, more confident. He was no longer playing scared. He was playing with clarity. The work we did with Caleb was so transformative that we realized our approach was revolutionary. We had created a holistic system, where the mind and body were not treated as separate entities, but as a single, interconnected system. It was the antidote to my father's brutal warrior mentality philosophy. We should offer this to other athletes, Ethan said to me one day, after a particularly successful session with Caleb. How many other players are out there, physically at their peak, but mentally in shambles, being ill-advised by a culture that tells them to just suck it up? The idea electrified me. We had a proven method, an incredible success story, and a philosophy that could, literally, save careers and lives. That's how the Advance Performance Group was born. We started in a small office, just me and Ethan. He was the CEO and head of performance science. He was the head of mental performance. Our mission was to offer elite athletes an integrated approach, where mental health was treated with the same rigor and importance as physical health. The Advance Performance Group was born not from a business ambition, but from a proven philosophy. We started with one clean, my brother. But soon, other athletes, from other sports, who had read about our approach in the Sports Illustrated article or heard about it through the community, started to call. They were the stars who, like Caleb, were broken by a system that treated their bodies like machines and their minds as aviations to be ignored. We weren't just fixing athletes, we were starting a national conversation about the true cost of the warrior mentality and the power of science to heal not just the body, but the whole person. The national conversation we started didn't stay confined to our clients. It exploded. Caleb's continued success, season after season, and the remarkable results we achieved with other athletes at the Advance Performance Group, became living, irrefutable proof of our philosophy. The press, which once saw me as a curiosity, the nerd sister began to see me as an authority. A voice that challenged the glorified suffering culture that dominated professional sports. My new platform became the debate panels on ESPN and Fox Sports. At first, the tension was palpable. They would put me next to ex-players and old-school coaches, men who are the personification of my father's philosophy. They would talk about heart, grit and playing through pain. And then, it was my turn. And didn't talk. I presented evidence. I cited studies on the impact of repeated concussions. I showed data on the correlation between lack of sleep and increased muscle injuries. I turned the debate of opinion into a science class. The revelation for the public was that behind the sports clichés, there was a physiological truth that was being ignored. I was arguing, I was exposing. And that made me a reluctant but fierce activist for athlete health and safety. I was invited to testify before the NFL Players Union, using my data to demonstrate and, most importantly, independent medical protocols, free from the influence of coaches and team owners. The impact of these appearances made me realize I needed a way to scale my message. That's when I decided to write the book. The Anatomy of a Champion, Beyond Talent was not written for my fellow scientists. It was written for the parents of young athletes, for high school coaches, for the players themselves. It was my attempt to translate the complex science of performance into a practical and accessible manual. The investigation for the book was a journey through my own philosophy. Chapter 1 was called The Warrior MYTH, where I deconstructed the idea that playing with pain is a sign of strength. Other chapters were Sleep is a superpower and mental health is the winning play. The book became a bestseller, not because it was about my famous brother, but because it gave parents and coaches the permission and the tools to prioritize the long-term health of their athletes over a short-term win in the youth championship. But my greatest ambition, the culmination of my work, was to create something that could protect athletes on a massive scale. My individual work with Caleb and other clients was effective, but limited. I wanted to scale my brain, my secret software. That's how my greatest innovation was born. I spent 2 years, in collaboration with a team of software engineers and artificial intelligence specialists, developing a platform. We called it Atlas. The Atlas system was the materialization of everything I believed in. It was a software that integrated all of an athlete's data streams, biometric data from wearables during practice, sleep reports, blind tests, workload in games, even stress levels measured through heart rate variability. Using a machine learning algorithm, the platform analyzed these millions of data points to do one thing: predict injury risk in real time. Atlas didn't tell a coach your player is tired. It said, based on the 4% decrease in his left quadriceps strength and his last 3 nights of suboptimal sleep, the risk of an ACL injury for this athlete in the next game has increased by 35%. The recommendation is a day of active recovery. It was my voice, my science, transformed into an early warning system. The final revelation of my impact came when professional teams began to adopt Atlas. At first, just a few more progressive teams. But after an independent study showed that teams using Atlas had a 25% reduction in injuries that cost game days, the rest of the league came knocking. Including the direct rivals of Caleb's team. It was a strange and wonderful moment. The same science he had used to save my brother's career was now protecting the bodies of his greatest competitors. From a secret scientist in a booth to one of the most influential voices in sports science. He had built a company, written a book, created a technology that was fundamentally changing how elite sports were managed. But in the end, the measure of my success was in the multi-million-dollar contracts for Atlas or in the headlines. It was in a simple truth learned along the way, a truth tried to pass on to every athlete and every coach match. The simple truth learned along this whole path is that an athlete's greatest talent is not their arm, their speed, or their jump. It is their vulnerability. And the greatest strength of any system, whether it is a team or a person, is not to hide that vulnerability under an armor of toughness and warrior mentality but to have the courage to understand it, measure it, and build an intelligent, data-driven protection around it. My father saw the human body as something to be broken and overcome. He learned to see it as a complex system to be optimized and, above all, preserved. Today, at 36, my name is no longer a secret whispered into a headset during the last second of a Super Bowl. It is the brand of a silent revolution in sports science. The Vance Performance Group has become the most sought after consultancy in the world for elite athletes, and the Atlas software is being used by teams in almost every professional sport. The conversation has changed. A new generation of athletes now talks about their heart rate variability data with the same pride with which they once spoke of their weightlifting records. Recovery is no longer seen as a sign of weakness, but as an essential part of a winning strategy. My father told me my place was behind the scenes. He was right. The backstage, the data room, the lab. That's where the real work is done. It is where victories are planned, where injuries are prevented, where champions are truly forged, not under the hot, blinding glare of the spotlights, but under the cool, honest light of data. He just didn't understand that the backstage was my prison. It was my throne room. The power is not in being the person on the stage, but in being the person who designs the stage, who understands its structure, and who can predict where it will break. They wanted me to be the tool. The high-tech wrench for his Ferrari. The calculator for the genius of instinct. Instead, he became the architect. He didn't just fix a broken machine, he designed an entirely new system. A system not based on myths of Superman, but on the reality of the human body. A system that understands that true longevity, true success, comes not from ignoring pain, but from listening to it carefully. And with this system, he is building a new generation of athletes. Athletes who are stronger, not because they can endure more pain, but because their bodies are more resilient. Athletes who are smarter, not because they have a magical instinct but because they understand the data of their own bodies and make smarter decisions. And, above all, athletes who are safer, because they and the people around them finally understand that the well-being of a human being is more valuable than any trophy. That is my legacy. Not my brother's victories, but the health of other people's children. This is my final analysis. My game plan. Now, the last question is for you. Think about your own field of play, your own battles. Tell me in the comments, what is your secret software? That unique skill, your perspective, your science, that only you possess, and how are you using it to become the architect of your own victory?